This week on the Great Debaters Contest Golden Series, we feature terrorism.
Welcome to the Machakos region of the Great Debaters Contest. Austin Yombok here.
And Mariam Bishar. We have a battle of the titans for you today. Lukenya School goes versus Ndalani Secondary, and they're debating on whether poverty and exclusion lead to terrorism. Proposal number 1, you have 3 minutes.
What comes to your minds on the thought of terrorism? The Garissa University massacre? What about the Westgate Mall siege? What about the Mpeketoni massacre? Yeah, all those two come to your mind. And it makes me want to cry thinking of all these bad things happening to our societies in terms of evils. These evils in terms of murders. The murders come as a result of terrorism. Now, the main question that would arise from this is why the murders? Why the terrorism? Now, to answer this question, why, is Calvin Musyoki greeting you all coming from Ndalani Secondary School. I propose the motion that states poverty and exclusion leads to terrorism. Now, what is poverty? Poverty, it's a low income level that is unable. It is unable to sustain one and his dependents. What is exclusion? It is being left out politically, economically, and socially. What is terrorism? Now, terrorism is the intimidation of a certain government so that you can gain political ends. Now, on to my first point. The poor people in the society, they have a die-hard character in such that they do everything their own will so that they can sustain themselves financially. For example, you're a rich man owning a certain part of land, and then you want a certain latrine to be digged for you. You can employ one person, for example, to dig the latrine. Now, you may come and ask the person, do you need another person to help you in the digging? The person will say, no. I'm comfortable, but in real sense, the person is suffering. It is really tiresome to dig a whole latrine by yourself. But apart from all this trouble that is getting to dig the toilet, why is he refusing some help? This is clear. It is because the person needs money. He'll do all he can in his ability so that he can sustain himself. So he can't risk so that he can be helped. And you know the money is constant, so you have to divide it among the people that will be able to dig the toilet. Now that was my first point. On to my second. Disappointment mentality. These people who are poor and excluded from the society, they have a disappointment mentality in such a way that these people, they've got no tomorrow. Why live for tomorrow? There is no need to live for tomorrow. Now, when these people are recruited in a certain terror group, like we have insurgent terror groups, we have the Al-Shabaab and the Al-Qaeda, we also have the state of homegrown terror groups. Now, to my fourth point, the poor are aware of any cooking meat. Meat here is in terms of something they do in order to get their daily meal. Now, a person who is poor will do all in his will so that he can get something to put his meal on the table. Now, that is the reason why I propose the motion that states poverty and exclusion leads to terrorism. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 3 minutes to give us your opening statements.
On stage is Daryl Odhiambo from Lukenya School, ready to oppose the motion that says poverty and exclusion leads to terrorism. First, what is the definition of poverty? Poverty is a lack of basic needs, and terrorism is the act of killing people, either on basis of mental illness or spiritual mentality. Also, we have exclusion. This is a separation of a group of people from a part of the country. Okay, I'll go on to my first point, which is ethno-nationalism. Ethno-nationalism is the state where people, a certain particular group of people, desire to break away from a main state to create their own state. In this case, we have Israel. In Israel, there's the Palestinian terrorist organization called Hamas. This Hamas has conducted suicide bombings in the Israeli part of the nation because they want to secede and form their own nation. My second point, religious extremism. Most terror attacks carried out by the IS, Islamic State, the Al-Qaeda, and Boko Haram are based on the Wahhabi ideology. This ideology means that Muslim worship is supposed to be monotheistic. Therefore, they are radicalizing their own Muslims so that everyone can accept Muslim worship, and whoever is opposed to that is killed. The fourth point, arms race. We have nations like North Korea. This nation is not a poor nation. It's a very, very rich nation, but it's the greatest terror threat in the world currently. If you follow international news, you have watched that North Korea has been conducting tests on their hydrogen bombs in open waters. They do not regard humanity. They just want to prove that they are powerful. They are rich, but they want to terrorize the rest of the world. Fifth and last point is political injustice. In some countries, we have certain groups which are not represented well. Again, I will go to Israel. In Israel, the Palestinians, back in the 1940s, they mostly occupied the geographical region of Israel. But as time commenced, they grew in their number, and the Jews grew in number, and they were able to depose the Palestinians of the leadership positions. Jews currently hold most of the positions in the government, and they oppress the Palestinians. Thus, the Palestinians have formed their own group to terrorize the Jews to claim back their land. Those few points, I'd like us to agree that poverty and exclusion are not the only factors leading to terrorism. Thank you.
We'll hear rebuttals now, beginning with Ndalani Secondary. You have 3 minutes.
The mention of terrorism reverses to our minds the attack of the World Trade Organization in America. Back at our home, we remember the 7th 1998 attack. We also remember the Westgate attack. We also do remember the Garissa University attack. Esther Keva from Ndalani Secondary School proposing the motion that states poverty and exclusion leads to terrorism. I would first like to oppose these people by saying that these Muslims are excluded. They are excluded from the society. That's why they form the terror gang people to perform the terrorism attacks. On to my first point, enmity between the poor and the rich. What do I have to say about this? The poor, they want to be in the same social class as the rich people. Actually, the poor people don't think about the future. They think about the present. That's why, if they are promised 5 million by the terror people, what will my dad do? He has no other option other than joining the terrorism attacks. On my second point, lack of sense of owning. The poor people have nothing to own of their own. They have nothing to be proud of. So, if there is these attacks, they don't see anything that they are losing. So what do I have to mean about this? We poor people have the interest in law and order in our country. That's why we join the terror groups so that we feel like we are excluded from the community. And my third point is about exclusion. If I am excluded from my country activities, if I am excluded from participating in political activities, if I am excluded from giving out my views about my country, what should I do? I should go to another country, at a place that people will love me, at a place that I'll feel loved, I will feel respected, I need to feel recognized. What will I do? I'll go to the people who are forming the terror gangs, and I will join them because they tell me that they will love me because they're going to train me to do what they want, the activities that they do most. So they are going to motivate me that, yes, I am capable. Thank you.
Lukenya, you have 3 minutes for your rebuttal.
I am Anthony Ndishu, coming here to oppose the motion that states poverty and exclusion lead to terrorism. I'll first begin by opposing the proposers' points. First of all, when they opposed our point saying Islam affects terrorism, Muslims are not excluded. Why? We have two branches of Islam. We have Islam, the religion, and Islamism. Islam is a religion where they worship Allah. Islamism is where the Muslims who practice Islamism feel that their religion is superior to others, to Christian, to paganism, to Hinduism, and all other religions in the world. Hence, try to impose their own culture and beliefs on other people through violence. So indeed, when they believe that jihad is a holy war, It's not a Muslim, but it's a Muslim practicing Islamism. Jihad is the holy war, as I stated earlier. So jihadists are promised that if you go and bomb a place, or if you carry out a terror attack, you will die and you'll go to heaven straight away. You also promised 72 virgins. This is known as radicalization. You also talked about the Garissa attack. You may be misinformed, but the orchestrator of the Garissa attacks was actually a lawyer, studied in WAMI, one of the top Muslim schools in Kenya, went to University of Nairobi, one of the top universities in Eastern Africa, and was a fully qualified and registered lawyer. So why would he live a lucrative career as a lawyer and go to carry out a terror attack on a university? So why would he attack a university? This is because he's radicalized. Third, selfishness. First proposer talked a point about a man refusing help to dig a certain hole. Is this really as a sense of poverty or selfishness or even ability? This man may believe in himself. He may know, I am able by myself to dig this hole 10 foot deep. He knows that if given a certain amount of days, a certain amount of time, I, myself, will be able to dig this hole. Hence, I do not need help. It's not a matter of money. It's not a matter of splitting payments. You mentioned rich people. I believe rich people spend money to make money. Hence, being a rich person, he will not mind paying 2 people. Another thing is the 9/11. The second proposer mentioned 9/11. A research conducted by the CIA concluded that terrorism does not come from poverty or even exclusion. But instead, poverty comes from rich people who believe that violence makes the world a better place, who believe that by violence they're able to make a statement to the society. Hence, I believe that poverty and exclusion are not, definitely not, factors that lead to terrorism. But there are many other factors that lead to terrorism. Thank you.
The proposition have been asked that they stated that most people who join terror groups do so in search of love. So why do they come back and commit terror crimes? And the opposition have been asked if the testing of weaponry by countries such as North Korea qualifies them as terrorist states. Proposer number 3, you have 3 minutes.
I'm standing still here to propose the motion that states poverty and exclusion leads to terrorism. When you're excluded from your community, how does it feel? You want to pay back. How will you do it? By revenge. And how will you do the revenge? Go join a terror group, revenge, and what will you feel? Success. Poor people are easily lured into terrorism. How on earth can you get a rich person and tell him or her, I'm offering you 1.5 million to go and bomb the Westgate? Does he really need the money? He has a mansion, he has a car, he has other businesses. A poor person, he has nothing. For example, a person with 6 kids, they don't go to school, he has nothing to live on. Will you still wait there to go join the CU and waiting for God's miracle? For God's sake, you need the money. Your kids need to go to school. On to the opposers. I had one of them say, Muslims are not excluded in our communities. Have you ever seen a Muslim going to church for Easter ceremonies or Christmas ceremonies? Have you? Give me an example. On to my second point. Poverty makes people idle. All of us know an idle mind is the devil's workshop. Will you still wait there, going to beg on the streets for 10 shillings? Will that 10 shillings buy you the normal tea that we see on the streets? The simple one-man does it for 5 shillings. Will it? 10 shillings. And there's a place, an agent from Somalia offering you 1.5 million. Will you refuse the offer? You want to drive the latest car in town. You want to be like other people. Is it sensible? My last point. Left out people feel offended, thus get back, forming gangs. You have a rich neighbor. You are poor. Then you are excluded. They tell you, shoo, shoo, you're not like us. What will you feel? You want to be like them. You'll go join a terror gang just to be like them. That's why I propose poverty and exclusion leads to terrorism. Thank you.
Opposition, you have 3 minutes to respond to the audience.
So first, greetings and salutations to the whole fraternity of great debaters. I would like to respond to what the third proposer said by first saying it's not practical for somebody practicing Islam to walk into a church and celebrate Easter, just how a Christian cannot walk into a mosque and celebrate with them their various holidays. Also, you have come up with the point that rich people offer poor people to join terror gangs. You don't know the motives that these rich people have. This is the point that most of us are overlooking. You don't know the motives that the rich people have to recruit the poor people into their terror gangs. Maybe some of them are wealthy businesses and they want to get rid of their competitors. Who knows, you will hire people to go and destroy their competitive business. So I don't think the saying, rich people hiring poor people, it's a point to lead to terrorism. Also, I'd like to respond to the question of North Korea. First of all, if you know your history very well, North Korea is ruled by Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un is a relatively young leader, and so in his ways of proving that he's a capable leader to the whole world, he has commissioned the building of various nuclear weapons and threatened to unleash them on various nations like the US. The building of these nuclear weapons has also not been authorized by the UN. This has led to North Korea receiving various sanctions from various international bodies. So by threatening to use their nuclear weapons on other countries, I think this brings terror into various people and various different societies. I would also like to state that some of these terror groups, for example, Al-Qaeda, have built schools and various public amenities in their countries. How can they commission the building of various public amenities to serve the society if they're poor? They also have extensive networks with the highest, most modern technology, including biometrics with voice screening, and some of them have even lawyers and doctors in their own network. So how can they manage to pay all these people if these people are poor? I do not think these are relevant points to push towards the motion that poverty and exclusion indeed do lead to terrorism. Thank you.
We'll hear closing statements now. Dalani, you have a minute.
For my closing statement will be in form of a question. Now, why are the minorities still considered even though it is the majority who rule in a certain state because of democracy? Now, that question is self-explanatory, but I will explain it. It is because the government is afraid of what the minority group might do because they have been excluded, they have been put apart, even though it's the majority who are supposed to rule. Now, to neutralize that, we find that the government considers the minority even though it is not them who are supposed to rule. And for your question, you say that it is irrelevant to say that the Al-Shabaab are going to, for example, are going to pay poor people from our country. Did you know that it is the Arabic-rich countries that support the Al-Shabaab in Somalia? They are the same. They are the same nations who support Al-Qaeda. Thank you.
Opposition, you have a minute as well for your closing statement.
I think the proposition are still contradicting themselves when they said Arabic-rich countries. I don't need to explain any further. Like an inexhaustible demon, terrorism has plagued us. Like an acceptable goal, terrorism has haunted us. But I stand here to disagree that it is poverty and exclusion that lead to terrorism. Instead, it is greed. Need to develop monopolies, ethno-nationalism, and various factors that indeed lead to terrorism. But we can and we should, as a people, stand up and try to fight terrorism with all guts we have. And also, when we try to address these factors, we can wake up from the living nightmare of terrorism and wake up to a safe haven for all of us. And once we realize this, we can partake in the words of the great Italian sages, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Thank you.
Daryl, you say that poverty and exclusion is not really the reason. And you raise serious issues like ethno-nationalism, and you take us to Israel. Good example, and you give us example of Hamas. You talk about religious extremism, and you talk about radicalism. You take us to North Korea, and you say that it's one of the richest countries, yes, but they are perpetrators of these particular acts. Talk about political injustice, bring Israel on board. I mean, I just loved listening to you from the time you started to the time you ended. Possibly what was lacking is validation, source citation. Anthony, a very keen listener, thoroughgoing critique. I mean, you really cross-examined what your opponent said, and at one point I thought you have watered down everything they had said. You know, cross-examination on the issue of Garissa attack, and say it is not the brainchild of a poor person, it's the brainchild of a rich guy. He's a lawyer, actually. But the problem here is source citation again. You know, if you could only validate your source, then it could be more appealing. The icing on the cake was the 9/11 report, and you took us to CIA report. You talked about poverty, the fact that they say that poverty is not really the cause of terrorism, but there are other factors. Well-read and content-based rebuttal. I gave you your marks for that. And Ken, again, very interesting debater. Let me tell you why I liked your presentation. You take us to the motive of the rich. You take us to the realm of the psychic and say, if we want to understand terrorism, let us ignore the superficial elements that we see. Let us go into the realm of the mind. Look at the motive, what motivates an action. And I thought that is a high level of debating. The only problem maybe you have is execution, which you can also work on. And the fact that we have professionals in these terror groups is an indication that poverty is not the cause, but most of them have their jobs, they are rich, they are earning good money, but they end up in these particular activities. Beautiful way to sum up your argument, and I love the ending. I came, I saw, I conquered.
Calvin, you're a good speaker, and you appeal to the audience. However, I wanted to hear the offers that that are there that really attract this particular poor and marginalized people that you're talking about that are led towards joining the terror groups. Are there any examples that exist of someone who said, listen, these people are offering me this amount of money vis-a-vis what I earn now? So if you had an example, and they're there in the dailies, if you just researched on that, you could have found such. So it's good to quote such examples. It would, and this cuts across to everybody in the team. That would have validated your team submissions. When you come to your ending as well, I would say it was fair. However, you end up making a straight statement when you say that Arabic nations support the terror groups. Some will say, no, we don't do that. So it was good also to validate that. So that was a straight statement. If you had facts, it would have been better, all right? For Esther, a good speaker as well, you know, but you don't come and say, I want to oppose these people. Which people? Just call them with the debate terms that we have. So, of course, don't mislead the audience as well by rephrasing the opponent's submissions. They didn't refer to, in their submissions, to Muslims. They talked about religious extremism, and that exactly was Calvin. He talked about, you know, religious extremism, and he was not trying to entirely talk of the entire religion of Islam, okay? So it's good for you to also counter-attack based on that. Good speaker, though. Rachel, I would say, you know, you also gave your best. You know, I would say fair mastery of language as well. You know, I want you to avoid personal biases. You know, do not narrow down the motion to religion. So that cuts across, I guess, to the two speakers, Esther and Rachel. We want you to be factual, all right? Don't entirely demonize a certain religion based on that. And of course, even to the Christians that you talk about, you know, miracles and the rest of the things, and you're thinking, wait, we're talking about poverty and exclusion. Kindly follow to that. Good and passionate debater, though, all right? All the best to the team.
Ndalani Secondary School, you have 62%. Please give them a round of applause. Lukenya School, you have 74%, making you the winners of this debate.
Congratulations to the two teams. Of course, we've seen one of the highest scores of the region. We'd like to thank our audience and also our viewers back home. Kindly follow us on Twitter at Great Debaters EA and all our other social media platforms. I am Austin Yambok.
And I am Mariam Bashar. Thank you for watching.